from the arrival of the first Brits to what we now know as the continental United States, there was a growing religious ethic and religious language that continued to fester and eventually shaped what we would know as the American Revolutionary War, and subsequently the Constitution and then the amendments to the Constitution. One of the sort of most important factors in the American Revolutionary War itself, and even preceding that with the ideas of independence, it was in a lot of ways the sort of the distance from Europe. Lots of the people who came here, like for example with the early Puritans and like Pilgrims as we might know them for most of our earlier childhood history books, lots of them, they were religious dissenters. And so as religious dissenters, they were rejecting, especially for the English ones, Anglicanism as well as Roman Catholicism. And so with that sort of rejection and with that distance, even for some of the ones, early colonists, these would have been persons, even if they were Anglican or Anglican leaning or Anglican sympathizers, these would have been persons who were Anglican and ended up being Anglican in sort of name only. Lots of the distance, as numerous scholars have noted, contributed to the fact that ecclesiastical authorities didn't quite have the legs and the hands and the sort of feet over here in the United States. Patricia Bonomi, for example, takes note of the fact that lots of the Anglican ecclesiastical authorities weren't present here in the New World. And so in a lot of ways you could get away with doing things different than they would do on continental Europe. And the same thing goes with various other orders. Historian Harry Stout, in his paper, Religion, Communication, and the Ideological Origins of the American Revolution, notes, for example, how important it was for the ministerial separation that would have been present in the British colonies, where that ended up later influencing ideas of democracy, where you have lots of persons, and Patricia Bonomi also goes into this more in depth, I think, where Congregationalism itself just began to arise from the fact that you had such a separation from the colonists from even their home churches and ecclesiastical authorities across the pond. So what emerges is a democracy and a democratic idea that extended from first their sort of religious ideas, where they wouldn't accept any sort of ecclesiastical authorities telling them what to do from a distance. And then these sort of things really went to influence their politics, to where they later came to believe that the government itself needed to be limited and the people should be the ones who are empowered, especially after the American Revolutionary War, when you didn't need a license to print English authorized Bibles because you were a separate nation. And so lots of this language that we get in the American Revolution, American Revolutionary War prior to, and then that even arises in the Constitution, comes from Protestantism as a whole, because the fact that there were people who had Bibles that were in their hands that they could read, that they could translate, that they could study, and that they could interpret. So there was a rise in commentaries, as Van Clay notes, in Protestantism, Catholicism, and the religious origins of the French and American Revolutions, that the Bible was so publicly available in the times prior to the American Revolutionary War, and then after that it seems to me to make sense that you would get something like an American Revolutionary War when people are just disillusioned with ecclesiastical and political authorities.